Rock and roll fans around the world are devastated at the announcement that Charlie Watts, longtime drummer of legendary band the Rolling Stones, has passed away. No cause of death has been cited, and the drummer was 80 years old. Join Factsverse as we pay our respects. R.I.P. Charlie Watts, the Rolling Stones drummer. In addition to being the longtime drummer of the Rolling Stones, Charlie Watts was also a husband, father, and grandfather. Sadly, he passed away at a London hospital August 24, 2021. Though the cause of death has yet to be specified, the drummer was suffering from some unspecified health issues later in life. Several weeks prior, on August 4th, Charlie had withdrawn from an upcoming tour the Stones were scheduled to perform. It was originally scheduled to happen much earlier, but was postponed due to COVID. Though the health reasons given for Charlie's withdrawal from the tour were unspecified, they did involve mentions the musician had undergone some kind of surgical procedure, and seemingly successfully. The withdrawal announcement was optimistic, saying the drummer simply needed some time to recuperate. However, it now seems likely Charlie was suffering from something more serious than he let on. Though there's been no official statement regarding what surgery Charlie underwent, some have speculated it was a procedure related to the drummer's heart. Still, those rumors have not been substantiated. The drummer seemed to have been in fine health as of late, with no major concerns being apparent from the outside. The Stones have toured actively over the decades, and Charlie has been with them every step of the way since he joined the band. Charlie may have seemed like he was in fine health recently, but there had been plenty of times during his musical career with the Rolling Stones where that wasn't true. The drummer notoriously underwent 2 periods of serious substance abuse and addiction during the 70s and 80s. However, he was eventually able to kick the habit. In 2004, he was diagnosed with throat cancer, but was able to make a successful recovery. He didn't even miss any performances because of it. While Charlie may not have been the flashiest drummer in the industry, his calm and steady hand served as the heart of the Rolling Stones catalog in the opinion of many fans. The last concert he performed was August 30th, 2019. The performance was part of One World Together at Home, a live-streamed charity event that took place during the early days of COVID-19. The Rolling Stones performed at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. It was recorded and streamed to audiences around the world. Though he wasn't the Rolling Stones' first drummer, he was certainly the most well-known. Charlie joined the group in 1963, the year before the release of their self-titled debut album. It was Charlie's drum beat that had provided the backbone for all the group's work since, and the legendary musician will be greatly missed by the rest of the band. Legend has it Charlie considered quitting the band in the 80s due to their rigorous touring schedule, but he decided to stay, performing actively for the ensuing decades until his death. His commitment to the Rolling Stones wasn't the only one he made in the early 60s and kept until his death. Charlie married his first and only wife in 1964, the same year the Rolling Stones' self-titled album was released. His wife's name was Shirley, and they remained together until Charlie's recent passing. Fans are still coming to terms with the news that Charlie Watts has passed away, though the Rolling Stones are still set to launch their most recent tour at the end of September. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already, and stick around for a lot more about Charlie Watts. Charlie Watts was born in London, June 2, 1941. His father worked for the English rail system, driving trucks. As a young boy, Charlie took up interest in jazz musicians like Charlie Parker and Jelly Roll Morton. At age 14, he began playing music. At first, he tried to play the banjo, but he found he preferred percussion. His parents subsequently bought him his first drum set. As a young adult, Charlie viewed music primarily as a hobby. For his career, he was planning on becoming a graphic designer. He studied graphic design at Harrow Art School and went on to work for a local ad firm in London. However, he still stuck around the local blues scene for fun. It was in this scene that Charlie was first introduced to the fellow musicians who would become the Rolling Stones. Charlie had been familiar with his future bandmates for a few years before joining them. He had performed with Mick Jagger in another group before Mick left to form the Stones. Subsequently, the Rolling Stones had a drummer who served the role for a time before Charlie. That drummer wasn't able to hold his own alongside the rest of the musicians. So Mick, Keith Richards, and Brian Jones asked Charlie to replace him. While Charlie had already been well-versed in jazz music at the time he joined the Rolling Stones, he didn't know all that much about blues. Because of this, his new bandmates had to give him a crash course on what it meant to be a blues drummer. Charlie became an avid student, studying the rhythms that helped make the blues what they were. He was a natural and kept honing his style over the course of his career. The Stones came onto the scene with their 1963 debut single, which was a cover of the Chuck Berry song, Come On. It was a modest hit, and the band's breakout debut came the next year. Starting in 1971, the Rolling Stones had a string of 8 consecutive #1 albums that lasted until 1981. After that, the band continued charting and performing successfully for the remaining decades up until Charlie's recent death. As they started selling more albums, their tours became bigger and more expensive to put on. As they did, Charlie started putting his graphic design skills to work to create some impressive decorations. Charlie and Mick continued working together on increasingly elaborate props and sets for the concerts, with fans coming to expect an epic level of showmanship from every show. In the 70s, Charlie began using heroin. Mick had already been using the drug, though he was able to handle it somewhat better than Charlie. Legend has it Charlie was constantly passing out from his heroin highs during the recording of the band's 1978 album, Some Girls. Mick was said to have shaken Charlie awake on one occasion, telling him he should wait till he was older and more mature to do the drug. Charlie took the advice of his elder drug abuser. He gave up heroin at Mick's behest, and then came back to it several years later. But the maturity that those years had brought didn't make it any easier to manage his addiction to the drug. The second time he started using was just as bad. His addiction had come back and then some by the middle of the 80s, and Charlie knew he was going to have to either give up the drug or eventually succumb to it. Thankfully, he kicked the habit in 1986 and never went back. The last tour the Stones performed was in 2019. It ended with a memorable show at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. The group returned there to give that final performance with Charlie for COVID-19 relief. Sadly, this final performance was a pretty underwhelming note for the legendary drummer to go out on. It featured him drumming unenthusiastically to pre-recorded "You Can't Always Get What You Want." Charlie is survived by his wife Shirley and his daughter Serafina. Shirley and Serafina will certainly miss the legendary drummer, and so will his bandmates and fans. Mick and Keith have been playing with Charlie for the better half of a century, and they'll likely never be able to find a replacement that can provide the same backbone. Now it's time to hear from you. Comment down below to share if you're more interested than ever in seeing the Rolling Stones, or if you think it won't be the same without Charlie. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.